These are the weekend's headlines in the southeast. A former vicar says
one of the lies that the church has told over the centuries is that Jesus is sinless, that he never made a mistake, that he was perfect, and by doing so they've laid an incredible burden of guilt upon people.
Good evening. For God's sake, don't go to church.
in his soon-to-be-published book, the Reverend Jonathan Blake accuses priests of being hypocrites, liars and peddlers of fairy stories.
Today his views were branded blasphemous by outraged clergy. John Ryle has the story.
Self-styled freelance vicar Jonathan Blake makes the final adjustments to the manuscript of For God's Sake, Don't Go to Church. Church leaders have seen the book launch publicity and they're outraged. Mr. Blake describes the institutional church as corrupt, manipulative and dangerous.
The Adam and Eve stories, the biblical miracle stories, Noah's Ark. Children are told and adults are told, you must believe this as a literal scientific truth. It's rubbish. People understand that outside. It's the priests that try and peddle the lies that confuse people. But church priests and the bishops and the archdeacons are the mega multinational company with incredible vested interests to protect. And when someone comes along fresh and alive and asks questions, they don't like that.
This afternoon he was disowned by his diocese in a statement issued on behalf of the Bishop of Rochester.
As Mr. Blake says, he's relinquished his orders in the Church of England. This means he has nothing to do with the Church of England or the Diocese of Rochester, and we dissociate ourselves entirely from the views he expresses.
For God's Sake, Don't Go to Church goes on sale in 3 weeks' time, and the advice from the Bishop of Rochester and other senior clergy is, for God's sake, don't buy it. But Jonathan Blake is confident of a major national and international sale, with 2 national newspapers interested in serialisation rights.
My new provision of ministry had received immense public support. It highlighted how out of touch and irrelevant the Anglican Church had become to most people. My book, published by the John Hunt Publishing House, pulled no punches, in offering a searing critique of its failings, its dishonesty, and its outdated message and approach. The press made it look as though I was criticising Jesus, whereas the focus of my critique was the corruption of the Christian message within the main denominations. It stirred a storm within the Church. Like a multinational, it wished to guard its vested interests and saw only threat in the opportunities my innovative approach presented. When Martin Luther nailed his proposals for reform, called his 95 Theses, to the door of Wittenberg Cathedral, it led to considerable change. In that tradition, on April the 14th, 1999, I was arrested by police for trying to nail my set of 95 proposals for loving reform of the Church to the door of Canterbury Cathedral. That Easter, I protested at York Minster during the televised Easter Day service, interrupting the sermon with a message for the Church.
In the Minster this morning are over 1,000 people. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
My loving, inclusive ministry had struck a chord that was not going to be silenced.
Well, now to a man who claims to be Britain's first freelance vicar. He will conduct baptisms, weddings and funerals in almost any style or any location you like. He's married pets and couples of the same sex. And he's written a new book which is called For God's Sake, Don't Go to Church. Well, not surprisingly, the established church doesn't exactly embrace him with open arms. Here is the Reverend Jonathan Blake.
Good morning.
Good morning. You claim to be the first freelance vicar in Britain. What does that mean, a freelance vicar?
Well, it was the Independent that actually called me the country's first freelance vicar. I call myself a priest working independent of any denomination. But basically what I think I've done is to break down the walls of the church, which has actually prevented the faith being expressed to the people of this country. And I've taken back the practice of that faith into the hearts and the homes of the people right across the land.
But you're not freelance through church. You used to be Church of England, and they no longer welcome you.
I worked traditionally for almost 12 years within the Church of England, and then I took a decision that I no longer wanted to go back into parochial ministry because I felt that was claustrophobic and I thought it prevented me from expressing my priesthood. And now I have the lovely experience of being able to take services for people, baptisms, marriages, whatever type of service, wherever they choose for them to happen, and the content, the style, the whole approach being their choice, not something forced upon them, but what arises from their own hearts and souls.
I'm fascinated that a man sits in a dog collar, having written a book called For God's Sake, Don't Go to Church. Where did that come? Did God tell you to write that?
Well, I think what hurts me most of all at the moment is that there are so many people across the country who've gone to their local parish church to look for a baptism or for a marriage or to have communion for ministry of one sort or another. And the church in all sorts of different ways puts obstacles in the way of people finding the path to God and to Jesus. That's a scandal. It's a scandal that's not come particularly to public attention. And through what I do, I can actually express that unconditional love that Jesus showed back to the people, outside all the rules, the regulations, the petty restrictions that the church has put in the way. But the church is very good at looking at people outside the walls of the church and calling them non-Christians, calling into question their practice of faith, their expression of spirituality. And what I love to do is to affirm and celebrate the faith that's healthy and abroad across the land of this country. And I take services, not in a shallow way for people who are superficial about their faith, but people for whom faith is a deeply important part of their lives that the church has rejected and ostracised because the way they express their faith doesn't particularly fit in with the way that the Church of England wants it packaged.
Sure. Jonathan, if I could ask you, now in your book, Jonathan, you claim that the idea that Jesus died to absolve us of our sins is, and I quote you here, the greatest con trick in history. And you say instead that Jesus was a real man, obviously he was, but he had faults, and he was the one who saw that love was more important than everything else. I mean, the fact that Jesus died to absolve us of our sins is one of the basic tenets of Christianity. I mean, can you see how that might be offensive to some people, Christian?
I think the church propagates a lot of myths. I think if you look at the Bible and read the stories in the Bible, you actually have contact with a Jesus who was like us, a mixture of good and bad. You can see him making mistakes and doing things that are wrong.
He was perfect.
It's the church's lie to
suggest. He came to earth in the shape of a man, but he was perfect.
I think that's the church's lie. I think if you read the Bible, you see he's not perfect, he made mistakes. And the genius of Jesus was to integrate the good and the bad about himself to make sure that his life in the end was productive in the expression of love to other people. Now, what the church likes to do is to pretend that they're all saints and they're all wonderful people, when they're not. Everybody in the church is exactly the same as everybody outside the church. And the way that God invites us to go forward is to learn from our mistakes and to live productively and creatively. And we're all on the same path in doing that. Well, I meet a lot of people who would have a different experience, who wouldn't have found the church welcoming.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The marriage of divorced couples, gay and lesbian couples, transgendered couples, the release of the sacraments of baptism and marriage from being imprisoned within church buildings back out into the community, into people's homes, gardens, community centres, beaches, pubs and clubs, mountain tops, hotels, circus rings, underwater and in the sky. It was a social and ministerial revolution that could not be stopped.
How did you get married? Did you have a traditional wedding ceremony, or was yours done in fancy dress like some of our guests here today? Do wacky ceremonies like those trivialise the event? Now you are a freelance vicar, yes?
Yes, I've been billed as the country's first freelance vicar. Rent-a-vicar, they say.
Rent-a-vicar. Why are you rent-a-vicar?
Well, because
I do lots of things, but in terms of marriage, I love the creativity and the imagination that's been expressed today, and I want to be able to marry people however they want to be married, religious or non-religious, wherever they want to be married, and to express a service that's meaningful for them.
So, legally they've got to go through, in this country anyway, some form of official ceremony, like a registered office or in some kind of proper church, but you're happy to officiate and a blessing afterwards?
Well, I wouldn't call it a blessing. There's a number of ways I go about it. They can either have a simple two-witness registry office sort of job in the morning, or under the new bill they can have the building itself licensed, and that can happen after my ceremony.
Oh, I see, that's right, because that changed a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Well, it's changing in the new year,
yeah.
But as people are saying here, what they regard as the important part, the symbolic part, the time when they're married, is the service, the ceremony, whether it's religious or non-religious.
Yeah, sure. Yes, John.
I just want to pitch in that the lady there had very strong views about what she believed about marriage. What I think is important about ceremony is that one person doesn't force their views upon another couple, other people about marriage. And what's important is that the ceremony and the ritual expresses what the couple involved believe, and that's the beauty about what I'm trying to provide. I placed an advert for my book in the Church Times, the main Anglican newspaper. A woman contacted me who had been repeatedly rejected for ministry by the Church of England. I had to create an organisation to facilitate people's access to ordination and placed an advert in the Church Times advertising a conference. Bishop Palmer, formerly of the Liberal Catholic Church, contacted me. I wrote the founding principles, and we founded the Society for Independent Christian Ministry that was inaugurated on January the 1st, 2000, at the rising of the sun. Over 50 people attended the first gathering in Dartford in March and were ordained at Hall Place, in the Great Hall, with a collective laying on of hands. News spread, and the society grew. I had married in the February, 2 strangers witnessing the registry office legalities, followed by our real wedding 2 weeks later, where those attending conducted the ceremony. Our first child was to be born later in this year of joy. Then Bishop Palmer announced that he was to consecrate me as a bishop within the province for Open Episcopal Ministry and Jurisdiction on December the 10th, 2000, at St Augustine's Church in Westgate-on-Sea.
I tend to think that Jonathan's consecration today signals to our nation the beginning of the work of reconstruction and restoration. Jonathan's episcopal ministry will become a focus for a renewal. Bishop Jonathan has vision. He is in the train of all those who, through the ages, have stepped out to take a closer look at the hypocrisy and indifference, the institutional falsehood, the pariahs posing as prophets. And God has blessed the stand he has taken. We would congratulate him, but rather be permitted to share his vision. Receive this mitre wherewith I crown you, for the service of that our most dear Lord. So we greet on you, Bishop.
I wasted no time in using my position to support social and ministerial change. On February the 14th, 2001, I had been asked by Richard and Judy to conduct the first gay wedding on the primetime TV This Morning show.
Moment just a little while ago, 28-year-old Neil got down on bended knee in the middle of the street, actually on a bridge, and proposed to the love of his life. And Mark said yes. It was just 8 weeks ago, and now it's their big day. And they're both here with their friends and their family to get the relationship blessed with a real bishop who'll be coming on in a minute. So I guess we ought to say congratulations first, huh?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shall we meet our bishop?
Oh, let's have the bishop on, yes. So Jonathan.
Here you come. The Reverend Jonathan Blake.
Hello. Hi. We've got a little stool for you, I'm afraid. That doesn't really befit a bishop, you should have a throne.
You're an ordained priest?
Yes.
Yes. But you've decided to kind of not actually work from one church or one parish anymore. Almost a freelance, really. Is the reason for that that you wanted to express more tolerance in the church towards couples like Neil and Mark?
Yes, very much so. I worked traditionally in the Church of England for 12 years, and then for the last 6 to 7 years I've worked entirely independently in order to try and make basic Christian ministry available to anyone and everyone without excluding anybody. So I go all over the country doing baptisms, heterosexual weddings, homosexual weddings, every sort of service, but with love and acceptance at the very heart of the ministry, which is what Jesus came to bring.
Did you feel that you had to leave the, if you like, the conventional ministry, the Church of England, the Anglican ministry, to do that? Because you felt that, what, they were excluding people with same sexualities?
Well, unfortunately, yes, that was my experience, that many people came with requests and with real-life situations, and the rules of the particular denomination excluded them having the service of their dreams, and that seemed to be an offence to the unconditional love, which I believe was at the heart of the gospel.
And do you feel that although this cannot be a wedding in law, that it nevertheless is in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the church?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the history of heterosexual marriage, it began with couples and communities celebrating the relationship and marriage of two people. That later in society became recognised by law. This is following exactly the same route. In the law of the couple and the community here, this is a legal wedding for them. In time, society will catch up.
And here we go, just before the wedding blessing for Mark and Neil.
And spaces between us, you have come to show you the world.
We are here in the presence of God to witness the marriage of Mark and Neil, to ask his blessing upon them and to share in their happiness. Love sets us free to be ourselves. Love gives us wings with which to fly. Love is the sunlight which warms our hearts and our lives. The scriptures teach us that marriage is a generous gift of God, a holy mystery in which two people weave the fabric of their lives together. So does anyone present know of any lawful reason why Mark and Neil should not be joined in holy matrimony? If so, speak now, or forever hold your peace. Neil, will you take Mark to be your wedded partner? Will you journey beside him from this day on? Will his be the hand that you hold, the heart you adore, the soul you honour? And will you give him the freedom and the security within which he can thrive and flourish?
I will.
Who gives this man to be married to this man?
I do.
Do you offer your sons your blessing for their marriage?
We
do.
From this day on.
From this day on.
I choose you, my beloved Mark.
I choose you, my beloved Mark.
To be my wedded partner.
To be my wedded partner.
To live with you and laugh with you.
To live with you and laugh with you.
To stand by your side and sleep in your arms.
To stand by your side and sleep in your arms.
To be joy to your heart and food to your soul.
To be joy to your heart and food to your soul.
To be your constant companion.
To be your constant companion.
And closest friend.
And closest friend.
To love you and bring out the best in you always.
To love you and bring out the best in you always.
And to be the best that I can be for you.
And to be the best that I can be for you.
I give you this ring.
I give you this ring
Because I love you.
because I love you.
Because I always want to be with you.
Because I always want to be with you.
Because I place my life in your hands.
Because I place my life in your hands.
Because I will hold you forever.
Because I will hold you forever.
That which God has joined together, let no other seek to divide. All-loving God, giver of life and love, bless Mark and Neil, whom you have joined in marriage. We hope, dream, pray only good things for them. You may now exchange a kiss.
The reactionary press ridiculed both the wedding and my orders. I sued Associated Newspapers International for defamation and was embroiled in 3 years of litigation representing myself to uphold the integrity of the Open Episcopal Church and our legitimate transmission of holy orders. Although the High Court ruled ultimately that the case was non-justiciable because it involved theological matters, the litigation had been successful in the court ruling that the articles complained of could be regarded as defamatory, that the case I presented was commended, and that no costs were awarded against me, but some given to me. It secured the legitimacy of the Open Episcopal Church and protected us from future defamatory articles. By November 2001, a third bishop, Michael Wilson, had been consecrated. I wrote the canons for, and we signed the Hazelwood Declaration, creating the Open Episcopal Church. A loving, inclusive, fluid community, released from the ecclesiastical politics and arguments of the main denominations, and relevant and accessible for the modern world. We were determined to press ahead. We now adopted an apostolic bishop-led form of ordination and ordained many applicants, including women and gay people. The next step was to consecrate the Catholic theologian Dr. Elizabeth Stewart as the first female bishop for ministry in England, at the Chapel of Royal Holloway, the University of London. The main denominations were incensed and failed in their attempt to stop the university hosting the consecration. My family's move back to near my former parish prompted interest. In the apostolic tradition, I also took services from the Chapel of St Francis in my home, at first a basic one I constructed, and then a proper loft extension. Baptisms, marriages, blessings, communion and ordinations. I hung crosses from the house at Easter, decorated it with banners and balloons at festivals, and arranged each year a donkey Palm Sunday procession through the neighbouring park. It also seemed that controversy followed me in whatever I did, because I applied myself 100%. We were approved as foster carers and fostered 2 boys who we were told were Kosovan refugees whose families had been brutally killed. Their previous 3-year foster placement had broken down. We fostered them for the next 2 years, took them on holiday and paid for them to return to Kosovo to find any remaining family. My decision to accompany them on a second trip to Kosovo revealed the truth that we had begun to suspect. They were actually young men from Albania, sent by their families to get an education and send money back to Tirana to help build a family home. We discovered that the authorities knew that men posing as boys were being fostered, were having relationships at school, and were manipulating the system. But they had no plans to stop this or warn foster parents about it. We were appalled. In 2006, I was unanimously elected to become Archbishop and consecrated female bishops for Wales and Scotland, 2 bishops for the south of England, 1 a gay man, and a bishop for Northumbria. Meanwhile, my own ministry was going from strength to strength. There were wonderful locations. Being asked by Lee Evans and his family to take services for them. Baptisms of all the children of some families over many years. Thousands of christenings. Weddings in gardens. Services in France. And gay weddings.
And finally, the bride and groom who tied the knot on the net. The vows they made to each other in central London have been witnessed on the internet by priests in Ealing.
I travelled the country, bringing love to people's homes and lives. Not stuffy church and Bible-bashing dogma, but celebrating the sacraments in a beautiful, natural, heart-centred manner, accessible and enjoyable to all. Having been released from the restrictions I had suffered under as an Anglican vicar, now I could say yes to people's innocent and sincere requests, making their dreams come true. I had made it possible for people to have baptisms, weddings, even funerals at home or in a location of their choice. We had ordained women and gay people as priests and bishops. Now came the next radical liberation. We launched Post the Host, offering people communion by post, as well as to anyone, not just Christians, as well as to children. No one was to be left out or excluded from receiving the food of love. Headlines appeared around the world. Catholic priests visited me concerned. But over the years we have distributed tens of thousands of consecrated hosts across the world. I celebrated Mass, open air, in Leicester Square and Trafalgar Square, gave communion to the homeless and to the sex workers of Soho. We took provisions to the street sleepers, hot water bottles in the winter. We managed to rehome and rehabilitate 3 men, and brought a middle-aged Jamaican woman home one Christmas from the streets who lived with us for 3 months. The Open Episcopal Church had tried repeatedly to join churches together in Britain and Ireland and churches together in England, but the Anglican Church and the other main denominations had politicked against us. Instead, in 2008, we joined the International Council of Community Churches and through them the World Council of Churches. Then controversy again from an imaginative and hands-on initiative. My son's school set them the challenge to be photographed in the most unusual place, reading a book. I roped them up safely and photographed them on our chimney. I was arrested for allegedly endangering their lives, though then released without charge when the police realised I had harnessed them carefully and accompanied them through the climb and roped them into position. They could never have fallen or injured themselves. Headlines appeared in Russia, Nigeria and Israel, among some of the countries that covered the story. However, the mistreatment and violence I experienced at the hands of the police was shocking and led me to set up the website When No One's Watching, to launch a 4-finger campaign calling for all police to wear body cams, and to become an independent custody visitor for 3 years, carrying out spot checks on how the police were treating those in custody. I was their constant irritant, complaining regularly, calling for improvements in care, and proposing specific reforms. When I realised the visitor scheme was just a front, behind which abuse and malpractice continued unabated, I became disillusioned, and finally went to the press when I found a young child locked up in an adult cell again in breach of custody regulations. The police were livid, and I was not allowed back. Then I was asked to conduct the wedding of the reality TV star Jade Goody to her fiancé Jack Tweed, when she was dying from cancer. The entire world had become obsessed with her plight. There was 24/7 international coverage of her every move. I flew back from Tenerife to take the wedding and attend the reception afterwards. Tragically, I had to attend also her funeral, published a prayer for public use as thousands gathered to mourn her passing, and was asked to take prayers at the family wake. In the years since 1994, I had crossed the country taking gay weddings, providing couples, families and communities with the wholesome, affirming and stabilising opportunity to solemnise their love with the sacrament of marriage and God's blessing. David Cameron and Nick Clegg's government resolutely promoted equal marriage legislation, and what so many had mocked in my early independent ministry was set to become law. National Geographic covered my part in this social revolution.
In Portsmouth, England, the wedding about to take place is one many here oppose. The betrothed are Phil and Roger, gay men challenging what some see as a pillar of society. Like many couples, they want to declare their love in a time-honoured way.
It is styled on a traditional, normal, heterosexual wedding. That's how we want it to be. The only difference is that it's not going to be recognised in the eyes of the law, but it is with us and our friends and family.
The laws of the state aren't the only obstacle. Mainstream religions deem same-sex marriage an insult to the concept of family.
We couldn't get any sight of the church at all for blessing. It was going to have to be either a hotel or a venue of some sort. That's where we then got in touch with Jonathan.
8 years ago, Bishop Jonathan Blake split from the Episcopalian Church. He formed a ministry of his own that recognizes gay couples in marriage.
The church and society have done a terrible thing towards gay couples and gay love, because the church has regarded it as sinful and evil. And what's been thrilling over the last 8 years is making available in this country a way that they can fulfill their particular dream and have their life and their life choices respected.
Thanks. What do you think? Sure. Yeah.
For Bishop Blake, same-sex marriages don't differ much from traditional unions, at least in one respect.
In my life so far, when I've encountered love between people, in terms of heterosexual love or homosexual love, that love has always been the same at its best. People deeply devoted to one another and wanting to give their life. From this day forward, for now Phil and Roger are blessed as a couple.
And with that, 2 unions, once forbidden, are sealed.
I find it so thrilling where I go to perform a gay marriage and all the community have come together. Grannies, aunts, uncles, parents, brothers and sisters, children, a whole cross-section of community. And they've all come, and what they experience in the gay marriage is something so totally normal. And suddenly what seems to be alien, strange and frightening is wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, Roger's dad, stand.
Despite his initial skepticism, Roger's dad rises to the occasion.
On the night of the crucial vote, the BBC asked me for an interview.
I respect that, but I think this is an important step forward for our country.
MPs look set to take the first step tonight to changing what we mean by marriage for good. Nick Robinson, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, with me here in the studio are Dr. Sharon James from the Coalition for Marriage and the Right Reverend Jonathan Blake, who's the Bishop of Greater London. And Bishop, to you first, it looks likely that the vote will go in favour of gay marriage when you look at the different parties and the positions. A good thing?
A wonderful thing, but it has been an inevitable part of our society coming to terms with discrimination and prejudice, overcoming that and working towards equality. And there are families, grandparents and parents on the edge of their seats waiting for the vote as a historic milestone, who've got gay and lesbian sons and daughters who want to be able to celebrate their relationships equally as they do their heterosexual children.
From your ministry, how do you think having the marriage certificate will change the lives of gay couples?
Well, the worrying thing is wherever you have institutionalised pockets of difference, it harbours prejudice. And some of the most vulnerable victims of that are our school children. Homophobia is rife in the classroom and in the playground because gay people and lesbian people are regarded as different. There is now the civil partnership provision, but it's different. Whenever there's that sense of difference, then you create ghettos of discrimination. There needs to be equality in terms of relationship for everyone in this country. There's a groundswell of support in the nation for gay and lesbian marriage, equal marriage. Since 1994, and since 2001, the Open Episcopal Church have been providing marriages for gay and lesbian couples. It's been wonderful to see groundswell support in the community, grandparents, parents, nephews and nieces, everyone coming together in celebration of a gay and a lesbian relationship. The law is finally recognising that. It's been so long in coming, but the politicians, thankfully, are doing what the nation wants them to do, and David Cameron has been very brave in leading this social reform.
When the legislation passed, the Prime Minister invited me to celebrate at Downing Street, and the Deputy Prime Minister invited me to an evening reception. Meanwhile, the John Hunt Publishing House's imprint, Christian Alternative, published my new book, That Old Devil Called God Again. I had also self-published a number of books, Be an Awesome Dad, Hopes and Aspirations, and The Diary of a Prisoner of War. Having been involved with children all my life and being a devoted dad, I was horrified when I discovered that a paedophile was intending to take up a job with children. I had only recently been invited to the House of Commons to give a talk about child abuse alongside Baroness Cox and Rabbi Romain. Having alerted every authority, with no effect, I had no alternative but to blog, even breach a court order to stop me blogging, and collected another conviction along the way from the perverse judicial system. However, my sacrifice was vindicated when the authorities finally heeded my warnings and barred the individual from having responsibility over children. The tabloid press ran defamatory, inaccurate articles based on a false police press release that the Metropolitan Police had issued, but then had to withdraw, and for which they had to apologise. My church, friends, members of the public and family, as well as those who had been abused by the individual, gave me exceptional support throughout and commended my bravery in standing up to the authorities. My funeral ministry is appreciated greatly. Funeral directors specifically choose me, as well as families who contact me directly. The World Service of the BBC featured my bereavement work. I have taken funerals by Lake Geneva, in homes and gardens, beside streams and in thousands of crematoriums and cemeteries. Services that are religious and non-religious, as well as for Muslims, Jews, Buddhists and Hindus. The bereaved family make all the choices, including what I wear, which although is likely to be minister's robes or a suit and tie, has often been football kit or Hawaiian shirt or even pyjamas and a dressing gown. I spend hours with each family, taking a full account of their loved one, and lovingly and personally speak about their life in the service. Since 2002, we have used our home to be a source of blessing to the community and beyond. There are multiple nearby schools and nurseries, and hundreds of children and adults pass by every day. In the drive, we have a secret treasure trove that geocachers, treasure hunters, can discover. In the clement weather, we fill the front garden with flowers, feeders attract an array of birds, a fountain splashes refreshingly by an angel, and the grass has a host of model animals, rabbits, sheep, hedgehogs, etc. There are the constant sounds of entranced children, laughter and happiness to be enjoyed. More than this, our home is known as the Christmas house, because every year, since 2002, we have festooned it with an ever more elaborate display of lights, decorations and inflatables to bring delight to the thousands who visit and to raise money for charity. Parents now come with their children who once had been brought in buggies by their own parents to see the lights. We have raised over £20,000 for Save the Children over the years. On Christmas Eve, we have Christmas songs, carols, poems and readings, as well as hearing spontaneous contributions from the children. We don't advertise, but every year hundreds of people gather on the pavement to begin their experience of the magic of Christmas. Channel 4 featured the lights on their Christmas Eve broadcast, My Crazy Christmas Lights. In 2018, we decided to become more directly involved in the benefit the lights were bringing, and linked with water for Africa. I travelled to the Gambia with 2 of my sons to visit 2 villages in desperate need of a reliable supply of clean water. We created a Just Giving page for the Christmas lights and raised our target of £12,000. Much of this came from the donations that children's fingers pushed through our letterbox, as well as donations from members of the public and the Open Episcopal Church. Plus an additional £11,500 was given. The £23,500 provided the funds for the 2 villages to have boreholes drilled and solar panels to pump the water into raised holding tanks that then supplied various standpipes located around the villages. The water has also enabled the villagers to irrigate a vegetable garden growing produce for their own use as well as for sale. We hope to visit the Gambia each year to visit these villages, as well as identifying and supplying additional villages with clean water. The Open Episcopal Church continues to grow, with applicants for ordination coming from America, Thailand, Egypt, Ireland, as well as the United Kingdom. I have not advertised now for over 20 years, and yet I am inundated with requests for ministry. I have never been interested in empire building, and know that just as the Christian Church has become a total distortion of what Jesus would have ever wanted or intended, I would not want to place my hope that either the Society for Independent Christian Ministry or the Open Episcopal Church would necessarily continue to grow. I am only too well aware of how easily beautiful visions can be destroyed as systems, traditions and precedents take over. My joy and privilege has been to be part of a phase of intense spiritual and social renewal that no one can ever possess or translate into bricks and mortar. It comes of the Spirit, and it has its own life force to challenge and transform. In that spirit of love and goodness, I am content to place my total trust. It has seen, in some part through my work, unimaginable changes, not least equal marriage, our ordination of women and gay people to the priesthood and the episcopate, and the upsurge in independent ministry throughout the country in a number of different forms, meaning the stranglehold of the main denominations has been broken, and the celebration of life, love and the sacraments have been given back to the people. My father loved the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. As I have memorized its verses and through maturity understood its wisdom, the last verse is my sustaining inspiration. And thou thyself with shining feet shall pass among the guests star-studded on the grass, and in thy joyous errand reach the spot where I made one turn down an empty glass. I have received over 1,000 letters of thanks and have brought love to many tens of thousands of people in my life thus far, people to whom I was able to say yes, whose glasses I was privileged to fill, and whose eyes I saw shining with joy. For that privilege I am so deeply grateful. And so the journey of love continues.